Thank you, Lolly. Well, it's time to bring Ellen to the microphone to share her own story. But before that happens, I have to share some comments I received from one of Ellen's Florida friends who was unable to join us today. She wrote, "We are delighted that her philosophy of everyone has a story to tell is now being directed at the woman who has recognized and shared this with others through her special interviewing conversations. To be in her presence brings out the best in people because she is so comfortable to be with and is sincerely interested in you. Ellen is passionate about people and life and shares that very special quality in her accomplishments. I couldn't have said it better myself. Please join me in welcoming Ellen Buchanan." Come on, girl.
I had to write it down, or I think I would be crying too. Honored guests, library staff, family members, and dear friends, thank you for coming today. What a gift to be a part of this gathering that honors all the women and men who shared their stories, either on Tell Me Your Story or One of a Kind. At the beginning of this venture, it never occurred to me that I would be doing it 20 years later. I shared this story with some of the library staff, and I want to share it with you. When I was a member of the Library Board of Trustees, I attended a State Library Association conference. The keynote speaker was a former U.S. Attorney General, Ramsey Clark. He mentioned with great pride that his sister had been a librarian for 50 years. I'll always remember one particular comment he made about human consciousness and libraries. He said, "We have a struggle between memory and forgetfulness. The library is a memory palace." One of the long-range goals of the public library is to preserve local history, to document experiences like you people in this room. And storytelling is a communal act. It requires community and it creates community. And what a community we have. This local project has been a team effort. The library staff, this is just the best library staff, and they are unstinting in their support. Thank you, Susan. Where are you? All right, Susan. Kara, who is my boss, she's been just great. Beth Fisher in the past, Lolly, Carol Spaziani, and thanks to Matt Butler, is he in there? He's my cameraman and editor and the special library assistant. And I want to recognize my research assistant, A.K. Traw. A.K., stand up. Where are you? Come on, A.K. She has lent spark and enthusiasm to these last, I don't know, how many years has it been? You started, I think, in 1992 or 3. She followed the footsteps of my very able research assistant, Suzanne Richardson. To be a person is to have a story to tell. An African writer, Lawrence Vanderpost, writes, "The Kalahari Bushman knows the importance of story. The story is his most sacred possession. He knows that without a story, you can't have a nation, a culture, or a civilization." In the 80s, I was reading Robert Cole's book, The Call of Stories, and this was fermenting for me to get this idea to record people's stories. Dr. Coles at that time was a professor of psychiatry and medical humanities at Harvard. Cole's mentor and friend was the poet, Dr. William Carlos Williams. Williams taught Coles to listen to his patients, but not only to listen, but to confide one's own story in exchange. Only through stories, said Williams, can one person fully enter another's life. Dr. Coles took Williams' advice to heart and learned from a young patient who had attempted suicide and refused to talk about it. The young patient eventually said to Dr. Coles, "You tell me your story, then I'll tell you mine." Because of that exchange in that book, I titled my first series, as you know, Tell Me Your Story. And the second series, One of a Kind, began in '93, like Susan said, and continues as next week I interview Christopher Merrill, the director of the International Writing Program. You, men and women, have shaped and influenced our community and made Iowa City a more meaningful place to live. I just look around at your faces and recall your stories, and it just brings a smile to my face. And like Lolly said, over a third of my guests have passed away, and that is a sad and sobering fact. Kara wanted me to introduce my family who's come, so I'd like to introduce them too. I'd like to introduce my husband and best friend, John Buchanan. Two of our 5 children are here, my daughter, Kristen Reynolds, and her husband, Mark, and Luke and Jack Reynolds, who love the public library, and my stepson, Brad Buchanan, and Eric and Ryan, our 2 grandsons. And I'd like to introduce 2 of my 5 siblings are here, my sister, Ann Nelson from Kansas City, and Margaret Hassey from St. Paul, Minnesota. Marking 20 years this afternoon reminds me how fortunate I am to be a facilitator and witness to these oral histories and to help build a memory palace here at the Public Library. I'd like to close with the words from the writer Isaac Bashevis Singer. When a day passes, is no longer there, what remains of it? Nothing more than a story. The whole world, all human life, is one long story. Thanks for coming.